What's up guys, Sean here, and if you're watching this video, then unfortunately we have made it all together to the darkest timeline because I'm going to have to defend Michael Bloomberg. So for those of you who are familiar with this channel, you know that during the course of my videos, I try to stick to the facts and stuff that I can prove and avoid insults and personal animus to people who are the subject of that video. I've done a ton of Young Turks videos on this channel, and that's due to the fact that I believe that they are left-wing nonsensical propaganda that blatantly misrepresent information. So when I do response videos to them, I try to stick to where I think they're misrepresenting information and avoid personal attacks and avoid sharing my personal thoughts on the particular people that are delivering this bad information. The one exemption to that rule is Michael Bloomberg, who is, without a shadow of a doubt, my most hated person in politics. And maybe that's just bias because I live in New York City and he was my mayor for 11 years. But I can't stand Michael Bloomberg because he is the antithesis of a libertarian. This is a guy who tried to ban salt in restaurants. He thinks that the city of New York should determine how food is seasoned in restaurants. He tried to limit the size of a soda that you can buy from a convenience store or movie theater. He sent private detectives to do illegal sting operations outside of the city of New York while he was mayor of the city of New York so he could advocate for gun control legislation in states and cities where he had no jurisdiction. Actions like that tell me that there is no limit to governmental power that Michael Bloomberg respects, and letting him anywhere near the White House would be a critical error. So imagine the position I'm in, where I finally see the worm churn against Michael Bloomberg. I finally see people attacking him, and they decide to attack him based on none of the things that I've laid out, none of the objections I have against him, but based on the one accurate thing that he said that he's actually apologized for because he's running in the Democratic primary. And you can't ever tell the truth when you're running for a Democratic seat. Which brings us to this Young Turks video, which I'm going to take apart, where they try to refute the one true thing that Michael Bloomberg said with terrible information and misleading statistics.
95% of your murders and murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male, minorities, 15 to 25. That's true in New York, it's true in virtually every city. And that's where the real crime is. You've got to get the guns out of the hands of the people that get killed. So you want to spend the money, put a lot of cops in the street, put those cops where the crime is, which means in minority neighborhoods. So it's one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana, they're all minorities. Yes. That's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them up against the wall and frisk them. And then they say, oh, I don't want that. I don't want to get caught, so they don't bring the gun. They still have a gun, but they leave it at home.
I don't know if he left out any racial stereotypes. I think he might have hit them all. So, I mean, why do we go harass minorities all the time? Because they're the ones doing the crime. You know how they are. Why don't we bother white people? Because white people are innocent. Really?
So, of course, Cenk has to start off his rebuttal against Michael Bloomberg by immediately lying about what you just heard Michael Bloomberg say. Michael Bloomberg did not say all white people are innocent and all black people commit crimes. He didn't say anything close to that. What he said is that the crimes that they were targeting, specifically in that tape murders and in the stop and frisk program shootings, were disproportionately committed by black and Hispanic people, minorities, as compared to white people. Now, we're going to get into the numbers in a little bit, but I want Cenk to give us some numbers before we do that.
Harass minorities all the time because they're the ones doing the crime. You know how they are. Why don't we bother white people? Because white people are innocent. Really? All right, hold on. Let's look at the facts now. So of the people that were stopped and frisked, 88% were blacks and Latinos.
So this might seem like a nitpick to some of you for me to point out, but I do have to point out that Cenk is misreading the statistics that he's twisting in order to present a false narrative about the actual numbers. It doesn't say 88% were black or Hispanic. It actually says 88% resulted in no arrest. Around 83% of the stops were black or Hispanic.
Of the people who were stopped and frisked who were black, how many of them had guns? 1.1%. Okay, but wait. Let's talk about whites, because poor whites, I don't know why we're ever stopping them. By the way, there is tape of police departments, also you can see it in Benjamin Dixon's thread, of police officers telling the people that report into them, I only want you to target young blacks and Latinos and males. That's it. Young black and Latino males. I don't want you wasting your time on white people.
So I'm gonna cut back to that 1.1% number, but I do have to address this point. Because the tape that Cenk Uygur is talking about says nothing near what Cenk Uygur is saying. What he was talking about is a tape of one supervisor talking to one officer who was stationed at the train who was ticketing people for jumping the turnstiles. Now, this officer was angry at the person he was supervising because statistically, the people who jump the turnstiles are black and Hispanic disproportionately. However, he wasn't angry at him for ticketing white people. The reason he was angry at him is because he was ticketing too many women who happen to be black or Hispanic. Cenk is completely misrepresenting what this one supervisor said to one officer about his ticketing practices.
Who commits the crimes in this situation? Who commits the crimes? Well, it's mostly teenagers, anywhere between the ages of 15 and 19, mostly male, blacks, and Hispanics.
Okay. Who are you stopping?
Everybody. I stop everybody.
54 tabs up to 820.
Mm-hmm.
25 of those are female. Tap.
Okay. Like I said, I stop everybody. Like I said, if I don't see a perp jumping over the turnstile, what am I supposed to do to him? That's what I'm saying.
These people are not going to pop.
How do I know that?
80% chance
a female Hispanic that I stopped, she said they did pop actually for a warrant, and I arrested her. Female Hispanics, the Hispanics that were supposed to be going up, that are committing the crimes, the people that I
think that she's gonna pop.
Did I think she was gonna pop? I didn't put no thought into it. If you come up and you get in and you'll come up a collar, I'm taking you.
Now, this was an old video and it tracks how the NYPD supervises officers on the job to make sure that they're doing work. So the opposition to the ticketing practices wasn't even about the gender bias. It was more about how other officers put in that station in that same situation all come up with the same results, and his results were uniquely weird. So it was more a lecture about that, and we can get into whether or not quotas are acceptable or not. But the point is that Cenk is misrepresenting the content of that tape.
Okay, so what percentage of white people had a gun? 1.7%. 50% higher than the percentage of blacks.
It's a waste of time.
So when they actually, a few times they stop white people, turns out they find guns on them more than they do on black people. Did that make them change their mind at all? Nope. The racial stereotypes still exist.
So unsurprisingly, this is another misleading statistic put forward by Cenk, because what he's talking about is not the total number of firearms related arrests. I can actually put that on screen so you can see the difference in who gets arrested for possession of a firearm illegally in the city of New York. What he's talking about is the percentage of stop and frisk stops specifically that resulted in an arrest for a firearm. And he says that white people were 50% more likely during stop and frisk stops to have a firearm on them. But in reality, he undercut the grandiose nature of that 50% number by giving the actual numbers. Because 1.1% and 1.7%, not that big a difference. In a statistical realm, we would call that within the margin of error. Also, and this is something that you guys might want to, look up for yourselves. Do you think it's weird that we initially started talking about stop and frisk for black and Hispanic people compared to white people, but in this one specific factoid that Cenk Uygur is pulling out of the data, he only compared black people arrested to white people arrested? Do you think that there's a reason that there's no Hispanic statistic presented by Cenk Uygur in this regard? Now, I already know the answer to this question, but since I had to go through 11 years of available NYPD crime reports, which will be linked in the description box below, I'm going to leave that one up for you guys to figure out. Now, part of the misinformation in this video is just Cenk Uygur inaccurately spreading bad information using cherry-picked or bad statistics. But the other part of it that really gets on my nerves is him just blatantly misrepresenting what Michael Bloomberg said to make him seem more racist, because Cenk Uygur is not a journalist, TYT is not a media outlet, they're a propaganda outlet, and Cenk Uygur is a smear merchant.
The racial stereotypes still exist. Well, if we found it on the white guy, he must not have meant it. If we didn't find it on the black guy, he must have it at home. Oh, for Christ's sake, man. Unreal.
Bloomberg was not and didn't even come close to saying that all white people don't have guns, and even when you find guns on white people, they're innocent, and all black people do have guns, and even if you don't find a gun on a black person, they're still guilty. He was describing what the program was intended to do. When he said they'll leave the gun at home, what he's talking about is the deterrence component of stop and frisk. Essentially, if you have strict penalties for illegal guns, and if you know when you go out with that illegal gun that you will be searched and then you will be arrested and face those strict penalties, you are more likely to leave the gun at home. This was no way anything close to what Cenk Uygur is describing that Michael Bloomberg said, and he's been doing it throughout this video because Cenk Uygur is a liar. This is propaganda. This is misinformation.
That when you look at the arrest, seizure of an illegal weapon or a fine, that's what I mean by 88%. 88% of the time, they found nothing at all, nothing at all. I'm sorry, I should clarify. Earlier I said the 88% number, no. The number of people stopped who were blacks and Latinos were higher. I think it was about 94%, okay? But 88% of the time, they found nothing at all.
Now here, Cenk Uygur at least attempted to correct his statistic by pointing out that the 88% number was the number of people who were not arrested for any violation during a stop and frisk. However, he then speculates that the number is closer to 94% for how many blacks and Hispanics were stopped due to stop and frisk, when that is not the case. The number is, as I said earlier in this video, around 83%, not 94%, not 90%, 83%. Where I get that number from? The court documents in the lawsuit over stop, question, and frisk. The ACLU also presents the 83% number. They're clearly not on the side of stop, question, and frisk when they're presenting that. Also, and I noticed this briefly and I just have to mention it, the ACLU is so captured by the progressive left that they refer on their website to Latino people as Latinx people. Latinx is not a thing. That is not something used in the Spanish language. If you want to refer to somebody in a gender-neutral way, then you use the male conjugation in Spanish and all of the other love languages. I'm Hispanic, Puerto Rican on my mother's side. Lots of people in my family speak Spanish, and that hard X sound does not exist in the Spanish language.
But they arrested a lot of people for a fare violation. To be fair, that's $2.75. Now, why would you go after it? That's the crime is where the blacks do the crime. Blacks do the crime, okay, John? Not good white people in New York. I mean, like if you went down to Wall Street, you wouldn't find any criminals, right?
No. Now after this, they go into this unwatchable rant about how the real criminals are on Wall Street, and here you are stopping people for jumping the turnstiles when the people jumping the turnstiles are only stealing a couple of dollars compared to the people of Wall Street. These are the same people, by the way, who will complain that the MTA's infrastructure is crumbling when it turns out that not enforcing jumping the turnstiles, which is a new policy under Bill de Blasio, has made fare evasion go up from less than 1% or right around 1% to over 8%. So now 8% of the people aren't paying for the subways. The subways are in crazy disrepair, but at least the NYPD is not being racialist by making people pay for the services that they actually use. But also, while saving the MTA money and keeping our mass transit system alive is one of the objectives of deterring people from jumping the turnstiles, it's not the only objective. You see, in the 90s, we figured out that a lot of the people who were pickpocketing and robbing people in Manhattan actually weren't paying for the subway. So when you arrest people who jump the turnstiles, what you're actually doing is creating downstream positive effects, because the people who do the pickpocketing and do the robbing and do the shoplifting never make it to the city. But who has time to investigate law enforcement theory when you're trying to paint your political opponent as a racist?
For a long time, all that people wanted was for him to acknowledge that some groups were being stopped too often. And we did find a video, thankfully, where he acknowledged that.
Just keep saying, oh, it's a disproportionate percentage of a particular ethnic group. That may be, but it's not a disproportionate percentage of those who witnesses and victims describe as committing the murder. In that case, incidentally, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
So there is a group that is being overstopped.
We just told you, when they stopped whites, they had guns on them at about 50% more than blacks did. But He can't get it out of his mind. White people are innocent and black people are guilty.
So they saw that, and it's completely unbelievable because Michael Bloomberg, out of all the statistics and evidence, now says that the only group of people that his administration actually over-targeted with stop, question, and frisk were white people. But here's the thing. What Michael Bloomberg said throughout this video and in that statement is 100% accurate. What I'm going to show you, and this will be linked in the description box below, is the NYPD crime report. Now, these reports are accessible, they're free online, they're easy to read, and they go back over a decade. And if you go into these reports, it does not matter what year of the report you're looking at. You will find in the murder number, around 90% of the murder suspects are black or Hispanic. And if you go to the shooting number, and the shootings number is more relevant because stop and frisk isn't about overall murder, it's about guns and specifically shootings, then you'll find that 96 to 97% of the suspects any given year will be black or Hispanic. And white people will account from anywhere between 1.5 and 2.4%. If you compare that to the overall proportion of stops that white people received, it was around 12%. White people were greatly disproportionately targeted compared to any other group. By comparison, since 81 to 83% of the stop and frisk stops happened to black or Hispanic people in the city of New York, and they represent anywhere between 95 to 97% of shootings any year that you look at, black and Hispanic people were under-stopped, under-targeted by stop and frisk, by the numbers. There it is, pure and simple. Now, once again, all of the NYPD crime reports that I used to make this video will be linked in the description box of this video, as well as any additional NYPD crime reports that I can find. And I do encourage you to go to the link and click on these reports. Look at the trends over the years. Notice how little these numbers change in terms of percentages year to year. And also look at the other crimes, the other serious crimes that I'm not talking about in this video, because you'll see the same disturbing pattern in all these other crimes. This is the exact data used by the NYPD to determine how they distribute police resources. And call me crazy, but I think if you're gonna Monday morning quarterback any police department, you should at least be absorbing the same information that they are. But the Young Turks doesn't show you this data. None of these left-wing activists or outlets will even acknowledge its existence, because if they did, then they would have to examine their own worldview. Now, if this was a hacked YouTube channel, I could end this video with that last sentence. I proved my political opponent wrong, so my job should be done and I should just end the video. However, as I said this before, and I'll say it again, there is one legitimate criticism of Michael Bloomberg's stop and frisk program, and that was the fact that he seemed to inflate the numbers beyond what the Fourth Amendment and the Terry standard would allow. Now, I mentioned this in a couple of videos on the topic, and I had an entire 2-hour-long argument with Cenk Uyghur's nephew on this specific subject, but my position on stop, question, and frisk is that under Michael Bloomberg, he inflated the numbers too much to violate the Terry standard. However, it was not racially disproportionate because by the numbers, it's nowhere near disproportionate to the level of crime in New York City. And this is evidenced by the fact that both after Bloomberg with Mayor Bill de Blasio and before Bloomberg with Mayor Rudy Giuliani, the number of stop, question, and frisk stops were significantly lower, but the percentage of stops that led to arrest because they're actually using the Terry standard went up. But the proportionality of who's being stopped, as in the percentages of the demographics of people who are being stopped, has stayed the same under de Blasio, under Bloomberg, and under Giuliani. Because the proportionality of who's committing the crimes has stayed relatively the same, and the NYPD, contrary to popular belief, uses data, not racism, to determine police practices. But those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this video, then show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. If you want to support me, PayPal, Venmo, Patreon, Subscribestar, or buy something from my Teespring store. This has been me debunking the Young Turks. Till next time.